Okay, so thank you for that time that we were able to go through. We were able to get some food, but we were also able to we had to have a lot of discussion around all of this to, to try to meet some of the needs that you were identifying there. As we go through, so we'll just kind of go through the proposal and try to stop and address some of those needs that you outlined, and then also we'll also try to, if you have questions and that sort of thing. So the first one,
Do you want me to talk?
Yeah, would you? Yeah, I'm done.
So I'm going to give Rob a break.
Thank you.
So the first one is not really a substantive change. I think we were just more specific than we meant to be on the Masters plus 30 stuff from earlier. So we're just basically saying people that get a Masters that requires more than 30 credits will be moved to the next appropriate lane if that happens. So yeah, so like the SLPs, right? That need like it's like, is it 60 credit hours? Yeah, I've been listening. So like having them on MA 30 rather than MA, where someone with Masters that took 36 credit hours would be.
Which is current practice.
Right, which is current practice. We'd heard from some groups when I made the list. I forgot about them because I'm also learning about SSPs. So we just made it more general to make sure we covered all the groups we meant to cover. So.
Yeah. So the next change is within number 4. There you go. And this is the part here where we tried to put in some language. So part of where we were even talking about has been around what I would call limiters. You guys sometimes call guidelines. There's guardrails, right? And what we're talking about is just ways that as you go through the system. We still do think that in terms of the other day on Saturday we asked you all for a lot of data information around what were those PDUs for the people that were doing 4 or more, right, through the process. Our understanding is that still we're talking about a lot of the people that are going through the ELA courses, and I think we've all kind of come around that. The only one that we did hear about was the fast fluency. Is that correct, Corey? Fluency fast, yeah. So, in terms of that, we still don't think that, and I'll use some of the language I used the other day. It's teachers are stretched so thin in their work day, their work week, that they, once they go home, they have additional work to do. And the additional work they have to do is, of course, grading papers and writing reports and getting everything done for the next day and ready to go. And even in the work day, there's not very many teachers that are, coming in at 8 and leaving at 4, right? So knowing that, we tried to meet your need around this component of they may advance no more than 1 lane every 2 years when using district PDUs, district in-service alone for lane movement. So when they're only using PDUs, they could only move a lane every 2 years with pure PDUs.
Can I ask just clarify on that? So if they're using, and maybe it's not allowed, if they were using credits and say 2 PDUs, they could do that if it's just only solely, okay.
That's correct.
Lots of
yes, that's correct.
Yeah,
and for those in the back, that's correct.
and I think the important part about that, is if you're taking graduate level courses, right, and you're working towards your master's degree, you're doing something like that. I still remember the year when I was driving up to Greeley to get my master's degree, and how long it took for the driving. It took, in the actual classwork and all those things. There's not, once again, there's not enough time under the sun or the moon to get there. So we hope that meets those needs that you've outlined in your concerns. Any other questions on that component? So the next one is this one where it was your concern down here about the closing the opportunity gap. And we do agree with you around closing the opportunity gap. It's extremely important, but we know that there's a lot of students outside of that definition. And so we didn't want to necessarily, limit it to that definition. And what we're talking about are students that maybe that are either at or above grade level. And there's students that have severe disabilities that maybe we know they won't necessarily, get to that. They're working off of modified standards, and we want to make sure that we're not limiting that language to just those types of PDUs. Does that make sense?
Yeah, go ahead.
And I think another really important point here is that we've talked often about the fact that the classroom teacher, the teacher that works with those students, because they know those students and because they know those students' needs, they know what's best for their kids. And so, yes, we are going to continue to be focused on the opportunity gap, on the achievement gap. And that is the most important thing that we need to do, but at the same time, we don't want to forget about everybody else that's on the edges. The next part, we have the PDUs. They have the 3 components. We saw how you went through and tried to define that further. We'll talk. I think we can talk a little bit more about it down below, right? Or do I do it here?
Spoilers, we'll see.
Okay, spoiler alert. But one of the things we wanted to make sure and get in here is that the PDUs that we're talking about, they would be approved and managed by the current PD department. So we have 2, TOSAs that work in that department, and they're overseen by, I can't remember the person's title, but they work hard to make sure that the PDUs that are going through meet the criteria outlined. So this is sorry. No, I'm good. I just finished one. That's one thing I've received in the last few days is lots of cough drops. So thank you. And tea. Yes, the tea. Thank you. Those of you who brought tea today. Thank you. So this is the next one is number 7 here, where I'm going to kind of talk about those together. So this is inside your proposal, you had the component where you tried to break it out: the study, demonstration, reflection, study of at least 45 hours, and we do agree that the 45 hours is probably that's what we're talking about, that's what we're looking at, but we don't think that it has to be outside of the work week, and the current definition of that of all or in part during their professional work week, and all or in part in the course of their regular assigned teaching duties. One thing that we wanted to make sure is, is sometimes teachers choose to do their study component, if it's a reading or looking up some information, they choose to do that during their duty-free lunch, or they choose to do that during some of their self-directed planning. Now, keep in mind, it's not the planning's not being done. It's most likely that they're planning at home, and maybe the next day they've been planned up for the week, and so then they'll be utilizing that time in a self-directed way. So what we're saying is, we don't need to require teachers to work more. Teachers are going to continue to work at their ultimate levels. And in addition to that, the study portion may fall for certain groups. For certain groups, the study portion may fall within their day. So what I mean by that is twofold. We often have teachers that are beyond the Common Core, that they go, and on teal days we have professional development set up for them, and they might be meeting in a cohort group. They don't meet every single month in that cohort group. A lot of times they meet in their cohort group after school 1 month, but then on a teal day they may meet during that teal day time as well. So it's kind of it's that combination of the two. you know, that the one that comes to my mind is what's important, you know, close to home for me is our teachers with that teach classrooms with students with affective needs identified. They have an amazing cohort group that goes through, and every month they meet and they learn things. They bring in speakers. They bring in all sorts of different sorts of readings and materials that they go through. Those teachers will often read those materials on their own time, or they might do it during their duty-free lunch. But they're meeting throughout the year at different times, and we don't want to. We want to make sure that we don't lose that opportunity to do that, because there might be some back-to-back type trainings on those teal days that would kind of make sense to have that time where they could meet with all of their groups at the same time. Additionally, as you remember, in our last contract negotiations around the master agreement, we do have a portion within the master agreement in which the SLT can make a decision to, if there's a group of teachers, or you know, that there's set professional development that we do every week within the school. If there's a certain group or a certain department that maybe can do and meet with something that meets their needs, they don't necessarily have to go to that. They can actually, you know, go to the SLT and say, hey, take a look at this. This is what we'd like to do during this time instead of that. And so we want to make sure and honor that component in the agreement that we've already had there. But bottom line is, teachers work way more than a 40-hour work week, and we don't want to require them to do that. Yeah. So thank you for. Where am I? Number 8. And I'm so, thank goodness I got to the CEUs, because now I'm going to let one of our SSPs explain this and go through this. So, and I get a break. Shit.
So we talked a lot about continuing education units and how those would go getting approval.
Yep.
And what the equivalency would look like and how those would get converted into credits. And so for this line, we say the continuing ed units shall be approved by the district in consideration of recommendations of professional associations, because all of those already go through an approval process. And then that 15 hours of CEUs would be equivalent to 1 college credit, which goes back to how we use those for PDUs. A PDU equivalent is 3 college credits.
And then you talked about the professional association. Yeah, thank you. Okay, thank you. And then the last part is on 9 and 10. We actually accepted your language on those, and we think that's a good. Those are good ideas, because as we look through, you know, employees that may be at that limiter point, right? We still want them to. We still want to encourage them to take that the district-driven professional development and really continue on the message of the district and the drive that we all agree with. So, ma'am.
And we just want to be sure that to say that in number 9, when we talk about you get $1,000 for every PDU, that would include the equivalent number of CEUs that Michelle was just talking about, because we don't really have a PDU system that allows our SSPs to collect those through using CEUs. So given that translation number, that would include the CEUs.
That would be 3. So just to make so it would be 3 credits would be equal to 1 PDU. So that would be 1,000.
So they would actually have to do.
They'd have to do the 45 hours.
Right.
Yeah. So it's whatever that equivalent of that would be, right?
Okay.
And then, and then finally this last one. We didn't know if this is like we think we know what your meaning was in here around the ECE to 12 is what you had in there, but what we had in there was accredited university programs earn post-BA in a birth through 21 content area, because many times we have teachers that are, say, with Child Find, that are working with the students that they're trying to identify those needs up front. In addition to that, we have many of our teachers and SSPs that work with our students that are in the post-secondary programs that are working towards towards those postgraduate. So I think that's what you meant by it.
It's special needs kids that can go till 21.
Yeah, and exactly, yeah, special needs students that go till 21, yeah. And I think the other word that was up there and we wanted to make sure and clarify with you was around content. And we're assuming that when you use that word, you're talking about the Common Core and also the Colorado Academic Standard content components, in which that you can, everything kind of falls under there. There's some like in the affective needs world, we don't necessarily have, we fall under the health and medical standards for those, and they do have some other districts and other states that have more defined affective needs kind of standards and things, but right now we tend to categorize those through those health and physical ed, as well as the speaking and listening standards with the Common Core. So I think that, I'm assuming that's what you all meant by that, and just wanted to, I see a nod by Susanna, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we've actually been looking at language from lots of different agreements to try to get it more clarity. It seemed like there was discussion back and forth about did we have it right? And so when we caucus, maybe we can look at what some of that other language looks like to just make sure we're all clear on what we mean.
So we want to be sure we're clarifying this because we've asked you a couple times before, and you indicated yes, but we want to make sure it's what you have in mind. That when you talk about content, you're not talking about a specific content like U.S. history. So if someone gets a master's in U.S. history, great, that's a content that we teach. But also you would recognize a master in curriculum and instruction,
Yes.
for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And also our SSPs had some concern
Sure.
that their stuff may not be content in the way that teachers think about
Sure.
content, but it's necessary for them to do their jobs when they're working with their students in the course of their employment. So are those things that you're considering would be included when you use that
Sure.
word content?
Yeah, and Pam, just as I mentioned, I think we have now looked at other language from other agreements that may help clarify that in language that we can feel good about. So as we caucus, we'll look at this, we'll look at some of those other things to try to make sure it's not just inferred, but really clear.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that's where we were with that, and that's where we ended up with the PDU discussion. I know you wanted to make sure and finish that up and get to a moving place. So let us know if there's any questions or thoughts that you have currently on that.
Hold on really quickly, I'm gonna find where it was now. It was. Sorry, let me find it.
I could start off with.
Yeah, I'm finding it now.
Starting with in your top section on the salary schedule, just wanted to make sure we understood the language around employees with a master's that require more than 30 credit hours shall be placed on the next appropriate lane. So if your master's requires, what would be a reasonable amount? 36 credits, you're placed on master's plus 45. If your master's, no.
No, so basically the way it works is like if you're a master's 30 to 44, you're in the master's lane. But if it's a 45 credit master's, then you're in the master's plus 45.
Right.
Yes.
It's a round down.
Yes.
Okay.
It's master's
No.
plus 30. Is that what you're saying? 'Cause it's
No.
So currently, many of
Yeah, this is.
No, it's not.
Currently, many of our
Sounds right.
SSPs have masters that require 60 hours to complete.
Yeah.
A typical master's is 30 credits, right? So it's current DPS practice to place them on the master's plus 30 lane
That's right.
when they're
That's what we're
hired.
talking about.
Yes.
And that's what we're saying, the next appropriate lane.
not consistently applied.
The only reason we changed the language is because when we listed it, we missed a group, and then I got concerned that like other groups would email me and say, hey, like we're in there too. So we just like made it more general to make sure that we encapsulated all the groups that are in that situation.
Yeah, and I think how it reads to me is that if your master's is 30. Thank you, sorry. How it reads to me is if your master's is 36 credits, that would be more than 30 credits, or you would get on the MA plus
45.
40, well, MA plus 15 or whatever. Like, it's just a little confusing, but like, as long as we understand,
Yeah.
I think we agree with the purpose.
It would be
You
MA
would at
plus
least,
6.
you would have to have at least that many credits in
That's
your
right.
master's to be
Above your
placed there.
master's.
That's right.
Above the normal, typical.
Yeah.
Above a
master's.
30
Right.
credit master's, yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, I think again, we understand the intent. We think the language might be more expansive than that intent. And so we'll take a look at the language with you again.
So we're happy to modify the language to match the intent.
Yeah.
And the intention is to say, if your master's requires 60 credits, you should get more than master's level credit because of the number of credits that it requires.
That's
Okay.
correct.
And so we'll take a stab at trying to just make it a little bit more clear as we caucus. She'll bring that back. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
So wanted to ask a question. So this is on 4A number 1. And wanted to hear just a little bit more, if you could talk to me a little bit more around acquire skills on topics of student need, including the achievement gap. Can you just say again for me, I didn't have the actual document in front of me when you were talking, so I apologize. Can you just talk to me a little bit more about your rationale there?
Yeah, we were just concerned that, you know, when we talk about closing the opportunity gap, that seemed like a narrow, what if you have a student that isn't affected by the opportunity gap current, you know, in this current state? So if it's a student that is either at or above grade level or, gifted and talented, twice exceptional. If you have a student that is, you know, that is on a modified standard or something that we know that, you know, you're working towards closing the opportunity gap for that student, but, you know, given the needs that they may have, you know, are you, you know, what's the, we didn't want to miss anybody is what we meant by it.
Okay, thank you.
So just back onto the every 2 years for lane change, I just want to walk through an example, make sure that this is how it would work. So if I got, say, 2 PDUs in a year, that'd be 6 credits. And then was on my way to do my master's, and I got 3 courses, and I had 15 credits. If you did that 2 years in a row, each one would be a movement. So as long as there's at least one credit-based area that's outside the PDU, that would still be a movement. That's how I read it.
Yes, and the scenario you're describing is not only is the individual taking a graduate level class outside of school, where they're driving and they're going and they're attending and they're doing that, but in addition to that, then they're doing
It could be
4.
online, right? Lots of graduate classes are online, no driving.
So, well,
Yeah.
you're driving home and then you're working online and sure. But I think the point is that the scenario describing is also the fact that you're now talking about doing 4 additional PDUs on top of all that. The only situation where we could see that possibly happening would be with the ELA coursework.
Right, first year.
Yeah, because unless you have other information that we've been asking for that shows otherwise, you know, then you know, that's why we asked you for that on Saturday. I don't know if you had any time to look at that.
So, Rob, we've noticed there's no call out specifically about how ELA works. So is the assumption here status neutral on ELA, required ELA coursework and current PDU process?
Yeah, we figured that, you know, teachers could make that decision of whether they continue to make that decision. Like, we don't want to do a takeaway on it. We want them to be able to make the decision, do I want to do the coursework through the PDU, or do I want to do the coursework through the university? For me personally, I would probably do the coursework through the university because I know that, you know, those credits that I earned through university, I could take with me if I went somewhere. But what you have to remember, PDUs are really, in a way, they're kind of a longevity thing because teachers can't take PDUs with them, right? A PDU is something that's a DPS specific thing, so it's actually kind of, it rewards you to stay in DPS. it doesn't necessarily, you know.
Sure. So something that we just wanted to point out in the way we proposed dealing with ELA classes was actually a version of what you're describing, but I think actually a more teacher-friendly version. And so the reason I'm sharing that is the way we approached thinking about ELA classes in our proposal was that participating in the ELA coursework for the ones that confer graduate level credit, you could either take it for graduate level credit, or you complete the ELA class and then automatically can receive 3 credits in the same way that PDUs work without having to actually turn it into a PDU separately. And so just wanted to point out, I think it would work in very much the same way you're describing. It just actually wouldn't require anything additional on the part of the teacher to complete that. Finishing the coursework would actually do that.
Are we talking about the same thing?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we are talking about the same thing, right? Or because it sounds like you're trying to say that we're not, and that's what I'm trying to figure out.
No, she opened it up a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, what I'm saying is, in the way that we described it.
And I apologize, Suzanne. I'm tracking everything, but yeah.
Sure. No, that's no problem. The only thing I'm saying is, in the version that we had for ELA classes could work as credit or as university credit, and that we were not asking that people go through the additional work of turning it into a PDU.
Okay, so in our proposal then, maybe where the miscommunication is, it's around we're saying that the 15 in-service hours is equal to 1 credit. So if you go through and you do the 16 hours or whatever it is, then that's technically a credit. Is kind of what you're saying. Saying the same. We're saying the same thing, more or less.
Yeah.
I think we are saying the same thing. I wonder, does it make sense maybe the next caucus take a look at our language on ELA, see if you think that's saying the same thing, and then let's revisit this question. Because I think it's just in the conversion, the effort it takes to convert it to a PDU, saying that's not a step that would need to be taken.
That's all we're saying.
We got the nuance. We'll discuss it in the next one. Okay.
Yeah, Amanda wanted to say something. Go ahead.
I don't have to.
Go ahead.
Okay. No, I was just going to say that our conversation focused more around not narrowing it just to ELA, that there might be other things that fit the same criteria, and so by leaving it as in-service credits, you're still not having to convert it to a PDU, but it's not ELA specific either.
The world, bro.
Uh-oh.
It's the Russians.
Amanda? Now I actually have another question from what you said.
Yeah.
Sure. So from what you just said, actually, maybe I'm not following. Can you point out to me where in the proposal? In paragraph 4. Okay, thank you. So I was trying to make sure I understood where you were talking about in-service credit.
Yeah, it's in the
Okay,
bullet point 4. Yep.
Oh, and I think just one last point I wanted to make sure and point out is, in number 4 there, when we talked about these things, we talked about, what would truly be collaborative would probably be, making sure that whoever that made these decisions, we had a joint decision on, but we figured that we already have a functioning collaboration department in the transition team to make sure that we could handle any of those issues. So, if there was a question about why something came up, then the transition team could hear it and could understand it, can talk through it, and then if there were decisions that needed to be made, then it would go through that. So I don't know if I said that as explicitly.
Right. I don't have any other questions.
Take some time, give them an opportunity to review.
Great.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Thank you. And everybody, let me just say, I just want to make sure you know that the district didn't take that time, we did. And we needed that time to really go through and understand what they were getting at with some of it. And that was also, a lot of that was passing back and forth information through Kayla. And so just, I think what we're gonna do is we'll do the same thing. Let's check in within 30 minutes and go from there, right? That's kind of where we are. We will try to do a better job of keeping you all updated. Thank you, Lawrence, for keeping people on the line. We also, sorry. We also wanted you all to know that we heard you outside and we saw you outside, and we just thank you so much. It's amazing to see how many of you were out there at the rally, standing up for students of Denver. Thank you for standing for our students, and thank you for being our backbone. We love you all. We'll be here for a few minutes, and we'll try to see where we can, if we have specific questions for you guys.